For business, Queensland to welcome Victorians from Tuesday after the state hit a crucial coronavirus target. An overhaul for South Australia's hotel quarantine system. Positive cases will be sent to a specialised centre.
Security at the dedicated facility will be provided exclusively by South Australia Police and South Australia Protective Security Officers.
Australian shares tracking wins on Wall Street, buoyed by vaccine hopes and the prospect of political certainty in the US. And research on converting sewage into power wins a coveted Eureka Prize. Welcome to ABC News, I'm Ros Childs. Queensland will reopen its border to Victoria on Tuesday. That comes after the state reached a benchmark of 28 days without any mystery coronavirus infections. Reporter Michael Rennie is in Brisbane and Stephanie Ferrier is in Melbourne for us. Michael, to you first of all, what did the Premier say in making this announcement?
Well, she basically said, Ros, that Queensland is now open for business to New South Wales and Victoria from December the 1st. She got those figures for the Victoria coronavirus figures overnight, and it was all good news, 0 cases. And so that saw her make that announcement on the ABC this morning that the border will reopen on December the 1st. And it's also not only those numbers, it's also that Victoria satisfied the other requirements that they were looking at, like some of the testing regime. They're satisfied with how that's looking going forward, and the sewage testing as well in Victoria. Let's have a listen to what the Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk had to say this morning.
Can I congratulate Daniel Andrews, their Chief Health Officer, and all of Victorians, because this is just such fantastic news. So it means on the 1st of December, Victorians can also come to Queensland, and of course Queenslanders can go to Victoria as well. So very, very good news.
So Michael, is Queensland preparing for an influx of interstate arrivals?
Well, they're already sort of seeing signs of that, Ros. A 250% increase in the influx of people inquiring about coming to Queensland, and that's obviously from yesterday's decision with Greater Sydney. And with Victoria now, we'll probably see even more people. But look, border checkpoints will remain in place while there is still hotspots in Australia, and South Australia remains closed to Queensland, but they are going to revisit that at the end of this month. The Premier has also warned against, just opening up the international borders, says that would be a catastrophe, and she can't predict the future either, is what she said this morning, and so there is a potential of closures in the future as well, Ros.
Now to Stephanie Ferrier in Melbourne. Another step forward for Victoria. Steph, has the border news gone down there?
Everybody is very happy with this news because we have dealt with a very long winter during lockdown and that deadly second wave. That's when we probably would have really loved to be able to escape to a little bit of Queensland sunshine. Alas, it was not to be. So the fact that we've got the sun coming out again and our horizons have once again expanded. So there are many people now booking madly. The travel rush will be on as of December the 1st to be able to head up to Queensland. Many are looking at that for their Christmas holidays. Of course, there's some concern, as Michael was just mentioning, about whether or not if we do have an outbreak, if all of a sudden you could be finding yourself being named as a coronavirus hotspot area, and then travel plans will be thrown into disarray. But the airlines have said that they're going to offer some more flexible ticket booking options for that as well. And this is the same day that we're also seeing the borders come down for South Australia, for the travel going into South Australia there as well. So the Premier, Daniel Andrews, says that this, of course, comes after 26 days in a row of 0 new cases here. And he says that this situation would not have been possible without very hard yards being done by all Victorians.
We always knew that if we had the courage of our convictions, stuck to the strategy, weren't distracted by the loudest voices and critics, but instead saw this thing off, we'd be able to find COVID normal, have a COVID safe summer, and look forward to 2021 with a degree of optimism, with a real sense of confidence.
And it's not just people heading north for the summer, but there'll also be many Queenslanders, the Premier hopes, who will be able to come down here south for some holidays and for some very happy reunions here as well. After all, he does want to make sure that people spend their hard-earned holiday dollars in Victoria rather than interstate.
Yes, great news. Stephanie Ferrier in Melbourne and Michael Rennie in Brisbane. Thank you both. And later in this bulletin, we'll speak to a Gold Coast travel agent about the reopening of the Queensland border and what it means for the state's tourism sector. The New South Wales government has announced the easing of some COVID-19 restrictions from early next week. Reporter Alexia Atwood is with us in the studio. Hi, Alexi. So what are the changes?
Hi, Ros. Well, these are all going to come into effect on the 1st of December. And the first major change is that if you have some kind of outdoor area in your home, you are going to be able to have 50 people over. So that's really good for people who are trying to plan Christmas events at their home. Perhaps they can squeeze more people around the Christmas table. But if you don't have some kind of backyard to utilise, then the rule is you can only have 30 extra people in your home because the ventilation just isn't quite good enough. Now, there's also some changes coming to the hospitality sector. Smaller venues are going to be able to apply the 4 square metre rule, from the 4 square metre rule down to the 2 square metre rule. So that means that smaller bars and cafes and restaurants are actually going to be able to have double the amount of patrons that they can currently have indoors. And the Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, has foreshadowed that that 2 square metre rule could actually be applied to all venues soon, but we're not quite there yet. Here's what she had to say.
The next step for us is to be able to apply the rule consistently across the entire sector. And we're concerned that if we manage things too incrementally, it doesn't allow the industry to adjust in time for Christmas and the New Year. So I want to make sure that everybody is very aware that hopefully the health advice will come back in a positive way in the very, very near future to be able to allow us to extend the 2 square metre rule to all venues across the hospitality sector.
And Ros, also from mid-December, there's a New South Wales public health order that requires employers to allow their staff to work from home. That's going to be removed. So essentially what we can assume is that next year there are going to be a lot more people transiting and travelling to city centres. But the government is incredibly concerned that mask wearing is at an all-time low right now because we have been going so well in New South Wales. We've hit 18 consecutive days with no locally acquired cases, but with that good streak comes complacency, and the government says that just isn't good enough. They want to see mask wearing as we move around the city more.
Alexi, thank you. The South Australian government is changing the way it handles its hotel quarantine system. It's still not clear how a couple caught coronavirus while staying at a Medi hotel. Reporter Ben Nielsen joins us now from Adelaide. Ben, talk us through what's due to happen.
Hello, Ros. So the government announced an 8-point plan, which is a proposal for changes to its hotel quarantine system. There'd been some pressure from the opposition especially to make these changes, and the government last week was saying that it already had introduced mandatory tests of staff at hotel quarantine on a regular basis, which hadn't been the case before. Today they came out with this 8-point plan, and some of the key points from that include that anyone who tests positive in a Medi hotel, like the one behind me, would be transferred to a specialist medical facility, and they've proposed using the old Wakefield Medical Centre site, which had been set aside, Ros, at the start of the coronavirus pandemic for any ICU patients, and has sort of been just lying low until it needed to be used, and this is obviously what's being proposed right now. And further points to that 8-point plan include that security at that medical facility will be provided by SA Police and specialised staff. Staff who work at that facility would not be allowed to work at any other high-risk areas like prisons or aged care, but the police commissioner said that they could work at pizza parlours still, which is an interesting note there, and access for that staff to a hotel for heroes. So if they prefer not to stay at home whilst working in that high-risk environment, a hotel especially for them would be made available. And here's what Premier Stephen Marshall said earlier today.
We're announcing is a new 8-point plan to make sure that we've not just got belt and braces, but we've got belt and braces and another set of belt and braces to make sure that we can really do everything we can. We know this is a highly contagious disease. We know that. We're learning more and more about this disease every single day. So are health experts right around the world, and we take all of that information, we put into practice all of those things that are recommended to us to keep our state safe.
And Ben, the investigation is continuing into hotel quarantine protocols.
It is, and SA Police said today that they had 600 people each day working on the quarantine system. Investigations so far have looked at nearly 500 hours of surveillance vision captured from this site behind me, as well as a number of devices from a person of interest, that Spanish national who lied to health authorities last week. The surveillance vision has been reviewed, the Chief Public Health Officer says, and it hasn't shown any breaches to protocol, but she said that her team would look at it again more thoroughly to see if anyone had touched their masks or particular surfaces, to really drill down on how the virus was contracted here at this Medi Hotel. Obviously that's very important because 2 cases that were previously thought to have received the virus overseas actually caught it whilst they were staying here. And the reason for that is not yet known, but Nicholas Spurrier says that the information so far gathered has linked them to the particular strain that has risen through the cluster, and is also very interesting and useful to her team. So the investigation is ongoing, Ros, and an independent review, the Premier says, will be undertaken after the emergency declaration is over.
Ben, thank you. US President-elect Joe Biden has introduced key members of his team at an event in Delaware, declaring America is back. The transition of power is underway, and the White House has given approval for Mr. Biden to access crucial national security information. Donald Trump continues to defy custom, refusing to concede after losing the election 3 weeks ago. North America correspondent David Lipson reports.
And now it's time for the moment of our guest of honor.
The White House diary is suddenly clear, and Donald Trump has presidential pardons on his mind.
Horn, I hereby grant you a full pardon.
The pre-Thanksgiving tradition this year concluded on a more serious note.
Will you be issuing a pardon for yourself? Well, good afternoon, everyone.
President-elect Joe Biden welcomed his cabinet nominees onto the stage with a message for the world.
America is back, ready to lead the world, not retreat from it. Once again, sit at the head of the table, ready to confront our adversaries and not reject our allies.
Career public servants are in vogue again. The inward-looking America First policy has been set aside for more globalist ambitions.
Multilateralism is back. Diplomacy is back.
And dealing with climate change is an urgent priority once more.
All nations must raise ambition together, or we will all fail together.
America's most pressing issue remains the coronavirus pandemic, still exploding across the country. Officials are now coordinating with the Biden transition team as they prepare to distribute 6 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine within weeks, 40 million by the end of the year.
We will ensure coordinated briefings with them to ensure they're getting whatever information that they feel they need.
Across the country, food lines are getting longer. Thanksgiving is taking on new meaning for all walks of life.
The Meadowlands YMCA is located in one of the wealthiest counties in the country, and the need continues to grow.
So does the stock market. The Dow breaking through 30,000 points for the first time amid signs of a peaceful transfer of power. In a hastily prepared press conference, the president tried to claim credit.
I just want to congratulate all the people within the administration that worked so hard.
Then, 65 seconds after stepping up, he walked out, ignoring questions about when or whether he'll concede.
Sir, why not concede for the good of the country, sir?
The White House has now given approval for Joe Biden to start receiving the presidential daily briefs of classified intelligence reports. The president-elect says he's pleased that the transition process has finally begun, but America's problems will soon be his. David Lipson, ABC News, Washington.
The top Chinese diplomat will meet with Japan's new Prime Minister today in a series of high-level talks between the two nations. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is on a two-day visit to Tokyo as concerns grow over Beijing's assertiveness in the region. He met with his Japanese counterpart Toshimitsu Motegi yesterday. They agreed to restart coronavirus-hit business travel this month and to continue talks on disputed isles in the East China Sea. Mr. Wang will meet Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga today, the first high-level dialogue since Japan picked a new leader in September. Thai police have summoned 7 leaders of an anti-government protest movement to face charges of insulting the monarchy. Demonstrators have been demanding for months that the king's powers be curbed. This is the first time any of the leaders have faced charges under Thailand's strict Les Majestés laws that prohibit speaking out against the royal family. If found guilty, they could face up to 15 years in jail. A large demonstration demanding that the king give up control of the royal fortune is planned for today. Let's get finance news now with Alicia Barry. Hi, Alicia. Wall Street, as we heard from David Lipson there, broken through the 30,000 mark. Has that boosted shares here?
Well, there's certainly a lot of optimism in equity markets, and that was quite a significant milestone for Wall Street to break through, as you heard that news of a likely smooth transition from President Trump to President-elect Joe Biden, helping boost optimism, but also the vaccine news that has been coming out in the last few days, most notably yesterday from AstraZeneca, has been lifting the mood among share traders. They are expecting that 2021 and 2022 will be much more optimistic in terms of economic growth. So we have seen the energy names and the financial stocks and the industrial names, both in the US and here in Australia, start to benefit and see quite a lot of money poured into them, shifting away from the technology and healthcare stocks which benefited through the pandemic. To your question about how the Australian share market is performing, it has recovered all of its losses this year and is now pointing positive for the year to date. It's up around 1/5% since this time last year. So that's quite a positive development given the steep falls that we saw during the pandemic, and it is pointing higher today. Though with the share prices at the levels that they are, some in the market are calling them exuberant, and it's unclear whether or not the underlying fundamentals are actually supporting the price levels. I spoke with the chief market analyst at InvestSmart, Evan Lucas. He says it's quite a concern that the fundamentals are unlikely to be supporting these price gains we're seeing.
We look at the price of the equity markets and we look at their earnings, they're not connected. There's no doubt about that. The price at the moment of the market has probably gone to what most people would say in fundamentals is exuberance. Some would even say over-exuberance. Earnings, unfortunately, we don't really have a very good understanding because a lot of firms at the moment are not giving forward expectations around their earnings. What 2021 and 2022 will look like is still fairly opaque to these firms. So there is a suggestion there could be this reckoning when those two start to meet, when earnings may or may not actually justify the incredible price run that we've seen.
As I said, the Australian share market is now positive for the year, and today it's up around 0.7%, with energy, mining, industrial and financial stocks leading the charge as investors sell down their holdings in technology and healthcare stocks. Right now, the All Ords is up around 0.7%. The ASX 200 index up a little more, about 0.8% higher. Let's take a look at some of the big movers, and Webjet, along with Whitehaven Coal and Origin Energy, are doing particularly well today, heading in the opposite direction. Mesoblast, ResMed and Zip, one of the big tech stocks on the market, down as well. Turning across to the Asian session, where Japan's Nikkei is having a very strong day, up nearly 2%, and the NZ50 pointing up around 1% higher. It's looking a little bit more mixed across China. US stocks rallied, as we've been talking about, with the Dow breaking through that 30,000 level for the first time. The Dow adding 1.5% to do so. The S&P was up 1.6% and the Nasdaq managing 1 1/3% gain. Having a quick check of commodities now, and spot gold prices are on the way down. Gold miners are also out of favour today, worth noting. Crude oil prices continue to rise, and the Australian dollar is once again much stronger against the greenback, pushing up toward 73.61 US cents, Ros.
Thanks, Alicia. It hasn't taken long for people to start booking their trip to Queensland. Now the borders between New South Wales and Victoria are due to open. And it hasn't taken long for prices to start rising either. Here's Ryan Thomas, the CEO of the Gold Coast-based agency Ignite Travel Group. Hi there, Ryan. So what was the response? I'm good, thank you. When Anastasia Palaszczuk made the announcement about New South Wales and today Victoria, did your phone start ringing straight away?
They went off the hook. We were basically up 250% from the day before, and we haven't seen levels of inquiry like this since January, which is our biggest month of the year. So